you worked on this for what, 7 years from 2011. It passed in 2018, but we're still fighting for some people's rights to be restored. What's going on since 2018 that's made us, still deal with this problem today?
Wow. So let me just set the tone with you for 2018. November 2018, we had over 5.1 million people voted yes for Amendment 4. And that amendment restored voting rights back to people with felony convictions after they've served their time. And, how we did it, when you look at those 5.1 million people, figuring out how was we able to get 1 million more people voting for us than any candidate on the ballot. But the most beautiful thing was the fact that in the political climate that we were in back then, just like we're in right now, a political climate that breeds hate and division and fear, that we were actually able to garner over 5.1 million votes. And none of those votes was based on hate. None of those votes was based on fear, but rather those votes was based on forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. At the end of the day, those votes was based on love. And we did it without involving politicians. At the end of the day, this concept, this belief in democracy, where we believe that a person's inability to pay or being poor should never be a barrier to voting. And that was the spirit in which the lower court issued its ruling. But unfortunately, just a couple of days ago, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals saw differently, but they felt that the lower courts got it wrong and they reversed the lower court's ruling. And so now today, we're back to operating under the legislation that was passed in 2019 that mandates that anyone owing outstanding fines, fees, and costs that was assessed at the time of sentencing, they must pay those in full before being able to register to vote.
And Patrick, most people know that after the Emancipation Proclamation was filed by President Lincoln in 1863, one of the first things the Southern states did was impose poll taxes to prevent Black people from voting. And so subsequent to that time, the United States passed the 24th Amendment, which prevents poll taxes. And so just think about it. Two people commit the same crime. They do the same sentence. They get out, they have the same fines and fees. One person has the financial ability to pay, either he, his family, or friends. Another person is poor, he can't pay. The person who has the money can vote. The person who doesn't have the money cannot vote. That cannot be a fair way of doing things in America. And I'm hopeful that this case is taken to the United States Supreme Court and they finally rule once and for all that no financial fees can be used to prevent people from voting. The amount of money in your bank account should not depend upon whether you can vote or not.
So Professor, tell us about your career as a trial lawyer and your dedication to civil engagement. And for you, why is it so important?
Well, this is very interesting because I'm a native Miamian, and there are not very many of us. I grew up in a segregated Miami, and from K to 12th grade, I went to segregated schools. I never saw a Black lawyer or a Black judge. I applied to a university, a white university, in February of 1964, and Byron, I still haven't gotten a response yet. But I'm patient. Fortunately, historically Black Florida A&M opened its arms to me and opened the vaults of education, which changed my life and the life of my family. I graduated there, went on to the Vietnam War. And it was in Vietnam that I began to get involved a little bit in the justice system because for small crimes, what we would consider misdemeanors as civilians, a non-lawyer could represent people. And a lot of the people where I was located, where there was a lot of heavy fighting, were Black. And they didn't trust some of the people in JAG, so they asked me to represent them. I came back to Miami at the perfect time where the University of Miami was admitting its first class of Black students. I had a little problem, Byron. I had not taken the LSAT, which is a requirement. And so I wanted to be in this first class. So I went to the dean's office and spent 11 hours persuading him that I should be allowed to start school before the LSAT because they didn't give the LSAT in Vietnam, in the jungle where I was. They gave it over here with the draft dodgers. That's not fair. He agreed. and I started law school. I got out and I couldn't get a job except at the public defender's office. It's the only place that offered me a job. It's like throwing a Brer Rabbit in the briar patch because it happened to be the best public defender's office in the country. And so I learned how to try cases. And I left there. I was the first African-American in the public defender's office. And that was a very interesting experience. I remember one time I won a case and I got ready to go into the bathroom and the judge's bailiff said, "Excuse me, you can't go in there." And I said, who are you? He said, "No, the judge told me to tell you that." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because the judge said he's in charge of safety and security and he cannot risk the jurors catching a venereal disease." What? So that's what I had to deal with. I left there and I was the first Black lawyer in the county attorney's office. Now that was interesting because I intended to do a lot of civil rights work involving police brutality. So my job there was to represent the police because I wanted to find out where all the bodies were buried. I wanted to find out all the tactics and strategies. Now, interestingly, Byron, I've never lost a case representing the police. I thought it was because I was the greatest lawyer in Miami. It was just that the people would not convict the police of anything. I got out of there and I started suing the police and I said, you know what? I may not be the best lawyer in the world because it's really, really hard to win cases against the police. And so what I saw when I got into private practice, and by the way, we were the first law firm in downtown Miami, Black law firm. But what I saw was that people who were financially well off and big businesses, et cetera, all had lawyers. Working people and people who were poor did not. And I came to the conclusion that God blessed me to be a lawyer to represent working people, small businesses, and the least, the last, the lost, the looked over, and the left out. And that's why I have dedicated myself to the causes of justice in terms of civic engagement. And by the way, I'm really happy to see that you and Patrick and the Dolphins are so civically engaged now because you have a tremendous platform. And whether you believe it or not or know it or not, thousands and thousands of people are listening to what you say and watching what you do.
You know, for me, it's you look at the people who follow you, and oftentimes it's young kids, 13, 14-year-old boys and girls, and they look up to you. And, you know, I try to be a good citizen, a good person, good character. So I try to influence them in a positive direction. I think voting across the board is something that is very strongly needed in this country at this moment. So I try to use my voice to encourage young people to vote. If they see Byron Jones, the football player, or Patrick, the football player, voting, I think they're going to be more apt and more warm to the idea of, okay, maybe I should get out, not be on the bench, and get out and vote and make something happen. So that's why I do it. I think I've been blessed with an incredible foundation and an incredible platform. Now is my chance to use it. Use it for good, and that's how I feel about it.
I feel very similar to Byron. But look, professional athletes, we don't know any more than the average citizen. We need to do our research as well. So I'm not ever going to sit up on, a stage and tell people, what I believe because I'm a professional athlete is the right view. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to encourage people to participate in democracy, do your own research, learn about your local candidates, learn about the national candidates, and then come to the decision that's what you believe is best for you and your community and your family. But like Byron mentioned, just by the uniqueness of our profession, there is a following. There are fans that look up to you. And so if you want to take advantage of that and be a positive change or have a positive impact in your community, I believe that you should and you're allowed to. I found it interesting, like there was the shut up and dribble comments that were made a few years ago, and they still happen today. But my question back to those people that feel that professional athletes should just shut up and play their sport is, how do you envision democracy working, right? Do we just allow politicians and political pundits to comment and share their views? Or do we want every citizen to have the right to share what they believe and say what they believe and support what they support? So that's my question back to those people. How do you envision democracy working? I envision a democracy where everyone has a voice and everyone can share what they believe. And just by virtue of our profession, maybe unfortunately, maybe not, we have a larger following. But I believe if we do it in the right way and we encourage other people to learn, I think we can have a positive impact.
And you make voting cool.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And I think another big component is this. It's not good enough just to be, your average citizen who does right. I think in a democracy, it's your responsibility as a citizen to vote, to understand the issues in your community, to understand the issues in the country. This is how you make a better democracy. This is how you vote people who represent you. And I was a person who didn't vote 4 years ago because I felt that way. I was like, oh, I'm good, man. I do things right. I stay out of trouble. But now I'm starting to realize that's not good enough. What you need to do is take responsibility and use your vote and use your voice to really enact change. You can't complain and be frustrated by something but not do anything. This is your chance to do something. So take the responsibility, learn, educate yourself, and vote.
Definitely. Another thing I've realized, like, my first time voting was in 2016, so I missed when I think I was 19 years old when there was the 2014 midterm election. And at the time, I kind of like to study economics, and I was like, oh, it's irrational to vote because your one vote as an individual doesn't matter. And then the more I learned, about history, like, democracy is fickle. There's a lot of democratic systems that have, they've tried and they've failed because people don't participate or people don't become educated enough. If they see that your county or your city has a very low voter turnout, then they're not going to respond to your wants and needs as a community. So that's something I learned. So maybe my individual vote's not going to sway the election, but as a collective, our votes have value. When your politicians see that your community has a high voter turnout, they're going to be more likely to listen to you as an individual when you show up to, whether it's City Hall or a protest or whatever it is. So maybe as an individual, your vote's not going to sway the election, but maybe it will because there have historically been close elections. Collectively, your vote has value.
And when they see young people voting too, they will respond to those wishes, desires, and issues that young people are concerned about.